and welcome to episode number 7 of our male mental health series. I'm very excited for today's episode. We're going to be diving into opening up, what it looks like, pros and cons, should men open up more, and all those goodies. Let's jump right in. I'm going to have my friend RJ on here, and we're going to get it going. Perfect. How you doing, brother? How you doing? Nice to see you again.
Good morning, man. How you doing?
Fantastic. Good morning. Good morning indeed. It's afternoon for you, right?
Yeah. We're changing things up this time, obviously. Doing it on a Saturday, but it's good. It's good.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully more people can actually access it too, because I know most people, work their 9 to 5, so it'd be a little bit more challenging. So, hopefully this can help reach a wider audience and people who usually aren't available around that time.
Yeah.
So we'll try it out. We'll definitely try it out. How you doing, though? How you feeling?
I'm good, man. It's been a very interesting week, say. But all in all, very, very good. I think the topics we're going to be covering, I'm very excited for. So I'm ready, man. Let's go.
I love it. Same here. I'm very much looking forward to this. I feel like, when talking about today's topic, which is opening up, what it looks like, the ins and outs of it, the pros and cons, men got some work to do. We got some work to do.
No doubt.
So I'm definitely excited to dive in and kind of visualize and give a couple examples of what it can be and what it can do for us in society overall. But in your opinion, what does opening up look like? I feel like everyone has a different definition, so I think it's important to kind of clarify.
Sure. No, absolutely, man. And it's interesting when we have these discussions, because I always have, right before we end up talking about it, I always have these interesting sessions during the week that kind of touch on these topics. So sometimes it feels a little deja vu.
I love it.
Yeah, but it's good though. It's good. So when it comes to opening up, especially for men, right? Obviously, for those that don't know, like I work predominantly with men, not only with men, but predominantly with men and men of color. And I find myself often, even just last night, having this conversation about what I'll start with sort of the side effects or the consequences of what happens if you don't open up. And then we'll try to lead that into why it's important to do that, right?
Love it.
So I have on my current load that I work with, I have some young men. So let's say adolescents, like 14, 15 years old. I have grown men around my age, late 20s, mid 30s, and then men even older than that. And what's interesting, what I notice is you see what happens at the different stages of life as we get older, of what happens when we don't allow ourselves to express how we're feeling and a lot of the support that we need, that we don't as open as we could be about sharing about it. And I see how it evolves over time. So when it starts with the young men, it can start with something small. Like I work with some people who they struggle with opening up with their parents about maybe early relationships, challenges with school, figuring out their identity, who they are. Then you get a little bit older. Maybe you start struggling with trying to figure out what kind of career do you want? Do you want to build a family? Do you want children? Then as you get even older, maybe the kids are growing up and maybe you're having struggles or trying to figure out how to manage your relationship with your partner, because that changes over time. So I see it in these different ways, right? Why that matters is because if we don't, again, as the men, if we don't and are not willing to open up and share and express how we feel, we're sort of condemning ourselves to having those type of challenges as we get older. I can promise you with as much certainty as I can possibly communicate right now, it will happen. Because what I'm just said to you is what I'm reflecting on what I literally just discussed this past week at different levels. So it can be a certainty. So the purpose of us doing it, number one, is to understand that we don't have to go through life by ourselves. We don't have to struggle through everything all the time. But a lot of us get the messages that is what is necessary. So part of what Carlos and I are here doing, part of what I do in my clinical practice is to deconstruct that idea because it doesn't serve us well. It actually ends up putting us into so much unnecessary heartbreak and hardship that I don't want us to have to go through. But learning the basics of how to do it, why to do it, and some of the effects of what can happen if you don't do it is what I hope you kind of take away from this conversation today.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, honestly, that's opening up is something that you can't put off. Like it literally, you put it off as much as you want, but you're eventually going to need to have that conversation and understand like the importance of doing it, because it does grow in the background, in my opinion. Like that, those feelings, those emotions tend to expand as you like avoid them or push them down, however you want to say it, whatever wording you want to use, and eventually they can even become your identity, like you mentioned. Like they can really become who you are, and usually it can even end up hurting you or the people around you.
Yeah, most definitely.
And yeah, it's really crucial and important for us to engage in the activity of opening up, finding someone who we're comfortable with, who is going to be there judgment free, who's going to be there to support you and the way that you need to be supported, so that we can actually have these conversations more often, because we really are not having these, we're really not doing this enough, in my opinion.
No, not at all. And trust, I will be doing some storytelling today because all this is fresh on my mind.
Ooh,
So
I love it. Okay.
You will get it in real time.
I love it. That's what's up. That's what's up. Jump right in. Let's jump right into the story. Tell us a little bit about your week.
Sure. So I'll use the most recent example because this is the freshest on my mind. So I had a young man. I did a family session yesterday. So it was a young man, his mother, and his father. And first time I had met mom and dad in that way. And what was interesting was, so I work with him one-on-one, and we have a lot of conversations. This young man in particular has the idea, exactly what we're talking about, that I need to deal with everything by myself, including I don't want to ask for help for anything from even my parents, even though I know they're there for me. So we were working through that. We were trying to process that last night, making sure mom and dad understand where this young man's feelings are coming from, what we're all learning about in real time. Crazy part of the story. So we're talking about relationships and dating. His relationship, past relationship that didn't go as expected and felt like his trust was violated. We made a connection about how him making some observations when he was younger about how his parents split up, how he felt like they weren't considering how it was affecting him and impacting him. And he didn't have the language, number one. He had none of the words to express what he's saying. He's saying this now at 17. He made all these observations. He was feeling very, very abandoned, very isolated, very lonely, because they were going through their own stuff. And what was interesting was we were able to make a connection that what was going on in his relationship, his past relationship, was directly stemming from things that he had never expressed to his actual parents when they split up. And he had been holding on to this for the last 3 to 4 years. So naturally it has caused a rift in their relationship. So the trust had broken down. The communication was virtually non-existent. But I'm learning this, right? I'm privileged enough to get to hear this information. And I gave him this example, and I gave the parents the example. For those that don't know, I'm also a father. And I said, listen, if we don't create that space, if we don't pay attention, if we're not intentional to make sure that they not only know that they have that space, the young men, to speak to us, but also that we demonstrate that behavior, meaning we're open with them so they see that it's okay, then we shouldn't be surprised that over time they're going to fundamentally struggle in being more communicative about what they're going through, about what their struggles are, when they need help, that they're going to actually ask for it. And I found that to be a very beautiful opportunity, truly, because there was some information that I learned over the course of that conversation. And it points to me to the exact same point I was mentioning when we first got started. So this is a person at 17 who already has these struggles. What do you think is going to happen when he's 27? What do you think is going to happen when he's 37? If we never address these issues and they keep staying on the same trajectory, you're going to get more isolated, more alone. You're not going to let anybody else in. And it's probably going to be very, very hard for you to develop real relationships with anybody because we're not dealing with it.
Mm.
You know, we're just sweeping everything under the rug. And I'm not here for that. I cannot stand by and watch us slowly devolve into that sort of being because it's so unhealthy. And life doesn't have to be that hard. Life is hard enough already, right? Let's not make it more difficult by shutting down and not creating a space or getting ourselves around people that we're comfortable with to willingly be open to share. So that's like the key point that I took away from that conversation last night. I thought it was beautiful because his parents really got to understand what this young man's been going through. And I'm truly hoping that we can kind of nip this in the bud and put them on a better path now. So he doesn't have to keep feeling like that for the next 5-10 years, you know?
That is amazing. That is amazing. And I love how you talked about the different ages and how that can really evolve. I think it's really important to understand that it's not like a teenager thing. It's not a 45-year-old thing. It really is a human thing. It really is something that we need to practice consistently and do often. And most importantly, like really model that behavior. If you're a parent specifically, like kids, I work with kids. Kids do not care what you say. They care what you do. They really don't. Like you can say everything you say, but if they see you doing something else, they're not gonna do it. Like they're just not gonna do it. So it's really important for us to open up as well. Really create that, like really show them, like, hey, this is what it looks like. Hey, look, I'm also struggling here. Hey, I'm also feeling this way. And or even I'm feeling this way. Not even also, because they might not be feeling that way. But just really sharing with them so that we can model that behavior, so they can actually imitate and start practicing themselves, because it's such an important and necessary skill. It's such a powerful skill, even to have in your repertoire as an adult. And when you don't have it, it can cause a lot of rifts in relationships, a lot of unnecessary suffering. Because that's why we're having this conversation, so we can really move away from this, a lot of this unnecessary suffering. Because, like you said, there's a lot of hardship and a lot of hard stuff that happens in life. So if we can move away from things that are at least somewhat under our control, like speaking to someone and opening up, then let's make an effort. Let's be intentional about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could, not to go too far, but you could even take it to the lens of when you see, like, there's to put things in perspective, we know there's a lot of lonely, isolated young men out there right now, right?
Just playing video games 8 hours a day.
Right. And they're struggling to even like seek out relationships, have relationships, maintain relationships of any kind. They're really struggling. Like, I watch these stories, I read these articles, I see what is going on here. And I see that a lot of it can stem from the fact that from when we're very young, a lot of them don't learn these fundamental basic skills like you were just speaking about, so that they can create the type of relationships that can stand the test of time, to have these people around that they truly would want to. Or when they're going through difficult times, to know that they have the support systems around them to help them navigate those waters, right? So that they can come out at the end of that and not completely be devastated and fall apart. But it starts, to me, from these types of conversations, because a lot of people may come from environments which we've touched on this before, where it was never okay or appropriate, right? So for the men listening, a lot of women, this is where we can learn from them. They are in environments where it is okay and it is promoted, it is encouraged to speak openly about the things that you go through. And for us, it's fundamentally not the case. More often than not, I'm not saying everybody, but more often than not, that's not the case. So we have to consciously make that effort now to challenge that type of thinking. Or we can stay on the path that we are on, and we see a lot of the hurt and a lot of the dysfunction that is going on. What happens when you constantly keep bottling things up all day, every day, and you maybe are surprised that you erupt on people, that you unload all this stuff onto one person that maybe gives you a little bit of attention. instead of thoughtfully doing it with people that you know that you can trust to be open with, that are going to be maybe a little more objective or supportive or allow you to speak openly. And I really want that message to be communicated, because I just know, because I see it. There's a lot of young men out there that are really having a hard time with the concept that we're touching on right now.
I definitely agree. I've seen it myself as well. I have a lot of friends my age who are, honestly, like they went through like I think a great example of that, because I feel like it's uh, a global traumatic experience. Through the pandemic, I've seen a lot of friends who went through a lot of hardship during that time, and
Yeah.
literally I have just been avoiding those conversations. I've really been avoiding diving into how they felt seeing so much pain altogether, how they felt being alone and isolated for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, many of them end up snapping or unloading on someone, and then like saying, and I quote, "I don't know what happened. I don't know where that came from."
Right.
And there's always as scientists, we live in determinism. Like there's always a reason for things to happen, especially behavior. There's always a reason.
Yeah.
It's always coming from somewhere. It's always stemming from someone, from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed a lot of young men specifically who are kind of like trying to breezing through, acting like it never happened, like really acting as if I'll forget, it'll get smaller. But realistically, like you said, it really does grow. Like it really does continue
Yes.
to expand, and that can be really hurtful. It could really cause a lot of pain in our lives. And if you're a man of color, you're already dealing with a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
For you to have to also deal with more pain, and isolation and suffering, it's really hurtful. It really is hurtful, and it really is unnecessary. To
Yeah.
literally to bring that back, because I really think we're experiencing so much unnecessary suffering that we don't need to be experiencing, simply because of paradigms and ideas that we're holding on to,
Yeah.
because we
Oh,
think that we can do everything on our own.
the old ones, I would say, the old ways of
Mm,
thinking, right? The
yes.
more traditional ways of thinking that I
Mm,
think we desperately need to evolve on those ideas, because it's, I again, for me, I have to listen to these things almost every day.
mm,
And I'm not talking about just the news. Like that's just added on top of. I'm talking about I have to deal with, again, I deal with the consequences. I deal with what happens when any of you out there don't deal with your stuff. You talk to
mm,
you might talk to somebody like me. And then we got to try to unpack and try to figure out and determine how we got here. Why did this happen? How can we grow and move beyond this, if possible? But I would simply say back, it would be much better to me in everybody's interest for us to proactively understand how these things occur and try to fix them sooner rather than later. Not simply waiting and pushing and pushing and pushing until it gets to the point of being unbearable. Then I break down. Then I finally go get help. That to me is not the best strategy.
mm.
But that's what I see so many people do is we wait and we wait and we push everything to the side, hoping it's just going to disappear one day.
It's
But it
not.
doesn't work. It
It's not.
doesn't work. I deal with this, man. It doesn't happen. I have to deal with all the fallout, and I don't mean to try to be dark here, but I have to see some of that stuff. The people that we don't get back,
Right.
the situations that don't get resolved. And I don't want that for us. So we got to do better. But we have to encourage each other, right? Which is why we're here. We have to encourage each other to know that, hey, we'll listen. It's not weak of you to share whatever you got going on. You might have to change your circle, because maybe you got some homeboys around you that, they're truly not helping you to express yourself. They're maybe clowning you, making you feel bad, minimizing it, downplaying it, whatever. I'm not supporting that. I'm talking about put real people around you. Start with your family, start with loved ones, but people who would genuinely let you express and state whatever it is that you're feeling and whatever you got going on. because that's going to be something that is sustainable for your lifetime. You know, I don't want us with this idea that we just need to keep pushing forward and pushing forward. That's how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I love that. I love that. I'm glad that you brought up the point of the circle around you. I think that a lot of the time, like when you're having those conversations on opening up, you hear a lot of, I don't have anyone to open up to, or like anytime I try, I get this result or I get this result. I'm glad that you brought up that point about, hey, like, let's be a little more intentional about people around you. Do you have any suggestions about how we can go about, you know, being intentional or even choosing the people that we're going to have around us that are going to help us to have that open space? Like how can we go about knowing if someone it's going to create that space for us?
Sure. No, absolutely. I'm gonna give a feedback tip, and then I'm gonna go back to my story because I think that this is applicable to your question.
Perfect.
So the first thing I always say when you're trying to build a support system is you always want to start small. You know, you want to start with things that if you share it and it's not received well, the consequences aren't as grave. They're not as high, right? So if I share something small with you, maybe it's just some small facts about myself because we're just getting to know each other. The risk versus reward, it's not going to be as risky for me because if you don't stay in my life, I didn't share that much information with you. So it's okay. It's annoying, but it's okay. But when I start sharing deep things with somebody, the reason why I want to know how to evaluate people in that way is because, let's say, for example, I don't know how to do that. And then I'm meeting you for the first time, Carlos, and I unload everything onto you, right? And I'm hoping like, man, you know what? He sat there and listened to me for 3 hours. So he's totally going to be my best friend now because he sat there. And then the next day I'm trying to hang out with him, and you're like, nah, I'm good. Now I feel really hurt because I'm like, man, I just shared so much deep personal stuff with you. Why are you abandoning me right now? Right? But I need to slowly, gradually build up to that is my point. Whether it's a friend, a family member, a colleague, whoever it is that you feel like you can invest in, you start small and you slowly build up to the more deeper rooted things that maybe you don't share with anybody. Same process I do in therapy. Okay. Now back to my example, why you have to have those conversations. So back to my example for those that had maybe not heard the beginning part. So I have a young client, 17-year-old male, and we're trying to navigate some difficult conversations with the parents. So one thing that we did is we absolutely tackled the elephant in the room. We didn't try to go around it and say, hey, you clearly have issues with trust with your parents. What's going on with that? And I prompted him and encouraged him, and we worked on it to be very open and transparent with them. Why? Because they need to hear it from his mouth, not mine. That's the whole point. You have to communicate with them. I don't want to be the one constantly trying to say what I think you feel. You need to be able to express how you feel. Right? That's how you build a real relationship. But what we did is we went back to the heart of some of those issues that this young man had for his parents, that he felt like he didn't have the security that he wanted. So he didn't feel like he could be expressive and open with them, which is why he had been distant all this time for the past few years, which was also creating dysfunction in his life because he was trying to deal with everything by himself, even when he clearly couldn't handle it. Even when he was clearly to a point where he didn't even know if he wanted to be here anymore. Right? As an outside person looking and observing this, to me, that's clinically significant.
For sure.
Right? But still, before we had that conversation, this young man's mind, it is, I can figure it out. No, you can't. You can't. If you could have, you would have already.
Right.
That was my example when I talked about we get to this point of being in crisis mode. That's when we start usually waking up like, oh my God, I don't know what to do anymore. Maybe I shouldn't do anything. Maybe I should just walk away and just forget anything even existed. I don't want us to have to get to that point. So the point of this point I'm trying to make is that we start by slowly growing those relationships with each other. Slowly building them over time, being much more intentional and thoughtful about what information that we share. and then you grow deeper in connection and feel more secure with that person. Then you feel like you can tell them bigger things, and you still want their feedback because they've been supportive for you the whole time. And you're like, yes, I need that. We want to encourage that type of thinking, so that in my example I just gave you with my young client, you don't have to be like him. And then years go by and now you're worse. You're worse because you're more closed off. You don't open up more. Now you're more distant. We don't want to encourage that type of thinking. So we got to start now.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, honestly, trust is absolutely everything. Like really building that trust and that connection with people, it's necessary. And yeah, like that's really gonna save us a lot of that pain. Like that's such a beautiful description, and it shows what happens when we don't, and the outcome that we can have. Really, like rash, really intense results that we can experience. And I want to bring up something that I've learned recently as well, and that's something that actually my mentor taught me. But it's something that I feel like we all can work on. We say I know a lot. Because especially since we live in this society where we're exposed to so much information, like even let's say opening up, we know that we got to open up, right? So when someone tells you, hey, like I would like to see you open up a little bit more, you'll most likely hear a lot of I know. But what we don't understand, what we're not doing is really understanding that by saying I know, we really don't know, because if we did, then we'll have the results, the desired results that we're looking for.
Correct.
So rather than saying I know, we can even move to saying, hey, I'm aware of that. How can I implement it? Or I've heard of that. Is that actually something that could work for me? Asking questions is usually the best way to go about it, and moving away from even that phrase I know, because most of us don't know. Most of us don't know, and that is okay. Like we mentioned in past talks, not knowing is okay. That's a perfect learning opportunity for us to find someone who does have more knowledge, who has experienced the situations, who has actually implemented things that has given them the results that we're searching for, and actually move from where we are to where we want to be. And honestly, many times we get to avoid so much suffering because you're learning from someone who actually can help you overcome or get past or get through where you're going through, in a way that's actually more helpful for your situation. So I like hearing you share your story. I was like, yeah, like I definitely get it. Especially teenagers. I think teenagers are very much like I know everything. And they're like, my parents don't have internet, they don't have Google and stuff, or whatever it might be. I've heard it too many times. But realistically, we don't know. Like, we really don't.
It's true. It's true, man. I try to make those connections too, you know, like I listen to, the parents talk because I'm like kind of in between their age and his age. So I can appreciate both sides, also being a dad. But I try to share with them, or try to share with him. They were your age before too, man. They're not you. They're not you. Nobody is you. Right? So let's be clear. I'm not trying to say like, because I was your age, I know how you feel. No, I don't. I might have an idea though. Like, let's not discount experience now. Right. Lived experience matters. I was 16. You were 16. I have an idea of what you might be feeling, of what you might be going through. I still need you to share with me. Then I can put more context perhaps behind what you're saying. Oh, you're going through dating, you're going through your first relationship, your first heartbreak. Man, let's talk about it. I'll definitely talk to you about what I went through. It was hard. And I'm here today. So it means I must have found a way to make it through. I would love to share with you some of the things that I have done, that I've learned over the course of my life that helped me get to this point. Because there is light at the end of that tunnel, but you might not see it right now because you're in it. It's hard to see beyond that, when you're in the stuff. So I think there's absolutely value in trying to relate, to one another. And especially in this case, like we said, teenagers, thinking that not just that they know everything, but just unwilling to listen sometimes. And again, to be fair, he was self-proclaimed stubborn. Not
Right.
my
Okay.
words.
Right.
He admitted. He admitted. Many of us are stubborn. It's not
Yep.
just him. Many of us are stubborn. We're set in our ways. And again, for me, from the clinical side, I don't want to see us go through so much pain that we maybe don't have to. And again, I'm really talking to the men here. This is nothing against any women that are listening, but this is really to the guys because we struggle with this the most. We have the most trouble here. Women are much better at this than we are, but we could be just as good as they do. But we have to understand that a lot of the circumstances we come from, they're not the most warm. They're not the most inviting. Some of us are coming from places where nobody maybe seems like they care about how you feel. And I hear you. Believe me, I hear you. But we're grown now. So whatever we had to deal with in the past, I understand it put us on this path, but we have to change things up now. For us. And then for those of us that want to build families, we want to work on it even more so because we want the families that we want to build to be healthier than maybe what we dealt with when we were coming up. You want to add anything to that, Carlos?
Honestly, yeah, I think that's amazing. And yeah, we are what our generation has been waiting for. Like it's really on us. Like many of us don't have that example per se of how to engage in those behaviors. Are going to create those healthier families who are going to allow or people to feel comfortable in sharing those feelings, emotions, or thoughts even. So it really is. It's our responsibility to make sure that we are better. It's our responsibility, and the important thing about responsibility is that it's up to us to take it in. Like you can decide if you want it to be a responsibility or not. You can just continue to do what generations have been doing before you, and most likely, let's be real, you're going to be creating the same pain that they created.
Facts.
But about us being more aware, about us being more intentional, about us being more open to receive and understand information that might feel uncomfortable in the moment, or it might even feel uncomfortable for a couple of weeks. Honestly, especially once you're diving into yourself and like really like getting to know yourself a little bit better, we can create a better world for future generations, for the family that you might want to create, the people that are in your life right now. So yeah, I love that. I love that you bring that up. I think it's important for us to really take that responsibility, and I know how it can seem overwhelming to be like, okay, but I have so much stuff going on. You telling me I have another responsibility? I gotta represent my entire generation. I know it can seem like a lot, and that's okay. That's okay. That's something that we can work through.
Right.
But it is absolutely necessary, and you can start small. You can start small. You don't have to jump like, all right, I'm going to solve everyone's problems. I'm going to change the world. That's not what I'm saying here.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying here.
That's pretty big. That's pretty big.
Yeah, that's pretty big. That's pretty big, and it can take a lot of time, energy, and effort. But start small. Start doing those smaller things, like RJ said. Start sharing a little bit more about yourself. Do the hard work of being a little more vulnerable with the people that are around you, who you trust. Just a little bit. Share a little bit about how you feel. And most of the time, like the beauty about opening up is that a lot of the time you'll realize that they've also been through something similar, or they know someone who has been through something similar. And then in many situations, you don't have to feel alone. You can start realizing the more alike we are than different. And move away from that isolation. Move away from that isolation that is honestly completely unnecessary. Like we really don't need to feel that way.
No, it's true. And so many of us, do feel like that. That's why I tried to make that point earlier, especially the guys. But I want to hit on something else that you just said, something that I really try to live by. To your point about if you want to help try to maybe inspire change in the world. Like we don't have to try to change the world, right? I think that that's a grand task that would make anybody feel overwhelmed.
Yes.
If you say like, you are responsible for changing the world. It's like, listen, man, I appreciate the confidence, but like I don't think I could do that, right? So I don't want to put that pressure and anybody feel that kind of pressure. What I always say is, I feel like the best thing that we can do if we keep working on ourselves is to be the change that you want to see in the world. So if I want people to be more respectful, then I need to make sure I'm leading as much as I can with respect. If I want to have other men, for example, this is my goal. I want to help other men open up more. Then I need to be willing to be open and vulnerable as often as not. Otherwise, it seems kind of hypocritical.
Right.
Right? If I'm keeping everything boxed up and I'm like, yeah, but Carlos, tell me your whole life story. Give it to me, please. That doesn't seem like that's very congruent. You know, I want to help inspire people. If I want to do like with you, you want people to be more consciously in charge of their health, right? You're going to be trying to live a certain lifestyle to try to promote that, right? You wouldn't be saying, hey, you should be doing these things, but yet I am not going to, because that doesn't make sense.
Mm-mm.
We don't do things that don't make sense, right? So to make it in a smaller bite-sized way to how we create that change, we do it within ourselves, because it's easier for people than to want to maybe come on our wave and consider trying some of the things that we do. I always like to give the example when it comes to like passively talking about therapy. Most people I know don't want to be told to go to therapy. It feels like you're being condescending, or you're attacking them, or, you know, you're trying to tell them that there's something fundamentally wrong with them. Okay. That's been my experience. I don't know if you had a different experience.
I've seen it as well, yeah.
Okay. So what I say is, let's not go around and try to tell people what they need to do. Let's live a lifestyle that we feel is healthiest for us. And perhaps other people around us will be curious and inquire, what are you doing that has you living this type of lifestyle? Because you clearly seem like you're enjoying yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of dark stuff going on, but you seem like it's easier for you to finesse your way through this. What do you do? And then now we have a beautiful moment to have a conversation where I can share with you, well, I do these things, and I've been working on this, and I've been changing this about myself. And slowly but surely, like, okay, maybe I'm a little more receptive. I'm willing to listen to what you're saying, as opposed to me trying to proclaim that something's fundamentally wrong with you and you need to go do this, this, and this to get your life together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people tend to respond well to that. So we shouldn't try to approach them in that way. But if we take care of us, then I think people naturally sort of look at that and say, man, I kind of want to figure out what they're doing. Maybe I can adopt some of that into my life. So.
Definitely. And honestly, you know, like, we're all about being vulnerable here, but I get a lot of people who follow me here on Instagram and come to me and basically, and usually do what we've recommended in past podcasts, kind of compare themselves to me and start saying like, oh, like, I've been through this hardship and like, it seems like you went through the same hardship. Like, I think I was talking to a friend about breakup. And we kind of ended our relationship around the same time. And she mentioned, hey, like, you're handling this so well. Like, you just seem so happy. You do all this stuff. And because I walk it like I talk it, I was able to talk to her about like, hey, what are you doing to deal with this feeling? What kind of inner work are you doing to actually, you know, create that healing that we need? What does your support system look like? And for most of those questions, she was like, oh, not much. Like, and she's not the only one. I've had men, I've had other friends as well. That's just the most recent example. But kind of realizing that, hey, like, I didn't just like get here. Like, it wasn't like I was just, I had to go through those feelings. I had to do the crying. I had to do the hard conversations with the people I trust that I know are going to help me.
Yeah.
And sharing that with her really helped her, like, kind of open up her perspective and realize, like, hey, like, I have some work to do. Like, me sitting and dwelling on these feelings is not really going to make this go away. And I was able to bring those up in a more easier way because I'm doing it. It's not something that I'm just like, oh yeah, like, it seems like you need to do some meditation. Like, no, this is what I did that really helped me to be this joyful person, to be this person who's filled with vitality and energy and happiness, and and seeing the positive of the situation that could be seen as something that's really dark or negative or whatever it might be. How did I
Absolutely.
shift those paradigms within myself? But I was only able to do that because I've been doing the work, and not
Hmm.
for months, for years I've been doing the work. So even that, like that comparison is like, hey, I want what you got now. I'm gonna do 20-minute meditation, and I'll get to where you are. That's
Hmm.
unrealistic. Realistically, like it's just unrealistic for us to like really want. Like it could take some time. Um,
Absolutely.
and some of us have a lot of work to do. So comparing yourself to other people is not helpful. Like it's really just not helpful. But it is like, well, something that I do love about social media is that it can serve as a way to highlight something that you might want for yourself. Um, you might see someone who's like, oh wow, like they went through this really hard situation
Hmm.
and they're still living their life. They're still happy. They're still adding value to other people. Like, how can I get that? Rather than being like, oh my God, like they're so much better than me or whatever it might be. Like,
Beautiful example. No,
mm,
that's such a good example. I just wanted to drop something real quick to exactly to your point. I watched this interview with Shaquille O'Neal on Drink Champs, their podcast, yesterday,
mm,
and there's like a comment that he mentioned about comparison, and he
mm,
said, I'll watch people and I'll compare, and I'm like, man, I'll see where we're different, and I'll say, I want to figure out how I can get what they have. He was talking about how like Jay-Z and some of these other artists and people would start this company or lead this new initiative. And he would be like, all right, I want to do what they're doing now. Instead of looking at it from like a jealous standpoint of, oh, well, how come they got it and I don't have it? Or I should have it right now. He's
right,
like, no, he said, I would go and I'd want to figure out how to do the work to go do what they're doing. That to me would be a healthy way, to your point, a healthy way of doing comparison. Because, and we've made this point before, like you can compare in the context of maybe things like we're the same age, we seem like we're maybe at similar points in life. You could try to make that case, but always remember, we're not the same people.
right,
We all started at different points. We all have different life circumstances that we're going through. So when you do try to make that comparison in your mind, understand it's not fully going to make sense. Because I'm not Carlos and he's not me. So I can't put myself on his trajectory and say, well, why I'm not doing what he's doing, or him saying, why is he not doing what I'm doing? We're all different people, no matter how similar we may be. So I think it's important to understand that fact. So if we are looking at somebody else and whatever they got going on, maybe instead of looking at it from any type of jealousy or envy, we look and say, you know what, I'm hoping to be inspired by what I see and say, how can I maybe try to get on a path of what they have? Or how can I maybe adopt some of the things that they're doing into my own life? And then let's see what happens.
right. And I think we live in this society that's so caught up in results,
Mm-hmm.
that okay, I want that result. Where I believe we should prioritize more the process, the work that it took to get there, and ask
Mm-hmm.
yourself, is that something that I want? Is that the life that I want to live? Like for example, Shaquille O'Neal and like maybe looking at JC, he could have won two ways. He could have been like, I want to be a billionaire.
Yep.
Okay, that's the result. Cool. Do you know what it took JC to become a billionaire? Are you willing? Are you willing and open? And is that the life that you want to live? Because I can assure you, I've heard JC say this himself. He had to literally not take a vacation for like 6 years. There's so many things that he had to do, be away from his family for months and months on end,
Yeah.
um, sleepless nights, all this stuff that he had to do to achieve the result. Is that the life that you want to live? So when we
Correct.
actually like look at the process, or even if you don't, because especially social media, a lot of people are not sharing the process. I do
No.
my best to go on there. If you see me, like I've been doing acrobatics for over 10 years, I'll share the videos of me falling on my ass and like really like failing, because I want
Yeah.
people to understand like, oh, like you want to. People tell me all the time, I want to do a backflip. I'm like, okay, can you do a back handspring? Like, are you willing to do 100 of them? Like, are you willing to do the process? Are you gonna be doing the stretching? Are you gonna be doing the strength work? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just like, okay, I don't know how to do a backflip. I'm gonna do a backflip tomorrow. No, like it's our process. Are you
Yeah.
open and willing to go through that process? And honestly, you might even realize that that's not something that you want. Like once you go through the
Correct.
process. Like you'll
Absolutely.
get to the point and you're like, honestly, like I don't really care that much about being a billionaire, like or whatever, or getting a backflip or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
But let's emphasize and prioritize more the process and the work that it took to get that result and the result itself. We can
absolutely.
have it like and acknowledge the fact that that does seem like something that I would like, maybe that maybe is really important though.
Hmm.
We should definitely if it's a celebrity or something, we could look into their life and how they live it, look at interviews, learn more about them. Because someone that's within our reach, I would highly recommend reaching out to them and asking them. Most people are really open to tell you a little bit more about the what they went through to get to where they are. You
Right.
can reach out to them, especially through social media nowadays. I have mentors who I literally became my mentors because I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, like I love what you're doing with health and fitness and behavior analysis. Can you tell me more about your process? Can you tell me a little bit more about your story? How do you get there?
Yeah,
And I've learned so much just because I really made an effort to focus on that process more than the result. And
absolutely.
I realized honestly that I didn't want the result that they got. Now I'm like, oh, actually, I want this. But I learned so much in that through that process. So overall, like definitely, I think that's something that as a society overall, is something that we need to work on. And
Hmm.
it really all starts with us really making that shift, in my opinion.
No, man, I think it's big facts. I even wanted to add to that point because I think about it from like the parenting perspective as well. One concern I do have, this is a legitimate concern that I have, especially because with the young people that I do work with, is to your point about them being very results oriented. It's like we live in this society now where everything is very instant.
Right.
You can instantly go viral. You can instantly watch what you want to watch. You can instantly listen what you listen to, what you want to. I grew up in
Mm,
a different time. For those of you who don't know, I'm 35 years old. I grew up before social media was a thing. I grew up when we still had landlines. I grew up with dial-up internet, AOL, discs. It's a different time, right? I came at a time where it was the end of the old school era, so to
mm,
speak, and the beginning of technology really starting to burst. And I say that because I feel very differently about the way I see the way young people are today. I think
mm,
this one thing that's very difficult. I'm gonna give you a clinical point now. For a lot of young people, when we're young, right, when we're teenagers, impulsivity is very high.
mm.
Okay, wanting to be impulsive. I want to do this now. That's natural, right? We all naturally go through that, especially in
That
high
love on
school,
our brain, yeah.
hormones,
Mm,
everything, right? Puberty. That's natural. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I notice now is now we also have a society with the conditions around it also preaching impulsivity. Do
mm.
this now. I don't like this. Switch it out again. I used to give this example like my son. It would irritate me sometimes where he wouldn't want to watch the same thing. He would literally watch like 5 minutes and then jump to another show and then jump to another show. And I was like, hold on. Stop. Just stop. You're giving yourself like information overload. You need to like learn to sit with this one thing, patience. Then you can move to the next thing. Don't keep changing in the middle of something because you're not teaching yourself to learn how to be resilient, to be patient. You're teaching yourself that when I don't like something, I just quit and then I move on, or I
Mm.
switch it up and then I move on. So one legitimate concern I have when I think about young people nowadays is the issue of not being willing to kind of go through that process as you were describing. You may learn a lot about yourself. I would make the case as well. And you determine if you even want to go down that path, if you even want to become that type of person. But you won't know if you don't go through it. But if all I want is immediate results, right, then I'm never going to really figure out who I am at the same time because all I want to see is me, the millionaire, the entrepreneur, the family person, whatever it is. And the fact of the matter is none of us figure those things out without going through that journey. That is the most important part. I give you another example for those that go to college or that want to go to college one day. Because I had this conversation with my cousin recently. When you look at your diploma, this is my thought. I don't know, you might have a different thought. I always think about the journey. The
Mm.
paper doesn't matter. It's what it represents. It represents all the nights that you had to study hard, the nights that maybe you had to work hard, the days where you didn't have enough food to eat or you were broke and you had to figure out how you were going to make it to the end of the month. It represents all of the time that elapsed, that passed by while you were in pursuit of that thing. For those that want to build a business or you're trying to grow a brand or whatever, when you get to wherever that moment is for yourself, then you go and you look back and you're like, wow, look at what I went through to get to this point, right? I don't want like to go viral and then be like, oh, all these people start following you. It's like, no, appreciate each incremental step in the process. That's what makes it worthwhile. That's what makes it have value, right? Not just, there you go, I made you a millionaire tomorrow. Then you don't appreciate any part of it because you didn't have to put in a lot of work to earn it. So that's a legitimate concern that I'm really trying to learn how to address, even getting ready for my own son, because he's still young, but I'm trying to learn how to address that maybe in some different ways. But these are things that I see, because I see, society's evolving with technology. And I think it's something we have to be very aware of, maybe in our day-to-day life, is maybe that's why sometimes it's difficult for us to have patience or to be a good listener. Because everything we want now, I can order my food now. I want Amazon Prime now. The Uber's here now. Netflix, change the show now. I need to learn how to be patient. Everything doesn't come immediately. You got to learn how we call delayed gratification. You put in work. That's what Carlos was just saying about doing a backflip. You put in work and then more work and then more work. And eventually you get to this thing that you said that you wanted. But it doesn't happen overnight.
I agree. I think that's a beautiful thing. Something that I like to think about a lot when it comes to that, what you're describing. It's like, think of any book from a successful person. Like if there wasn't a process, if the book was like, so I saw that I wanted to do this, I did it, and I won. That's it. That's the book. Like, who's reading that? Who's reading that? We really care more about the process. Like Benjamin Franklin or Bob Proctor, whoever it might be, someone that you look up to, and how did they get to where they were, to where they are? The steps that they had to take, maybe some struggles that they had to go through, the growing pains that they might have experienced.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of the journey. Like really finding that beauty, like my guy J. Cole said, the beauty in the struggle, even.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. And like you said, like I'm glad that you brought the college experience as well. I have 2 diplomas. I have a bachelor's and a master's and all that stuff. And when I look at those things, it's not like, I had a graduation with 20,000 people and all that stuff. And no, I was like, that was cool. It was a cool experience to have. But overall, what I think of is like those 4 years where I met so many cool people. The times where I had my staying up all night studying at the library, like literally with some friends, and like really diving into specific conversations, and then going to work the next day, still doing like really just all that whole process. That's where you get to know yourself a lot more. That's where you get to experience life in ways that you didn't even think you could. So like it's so important to realize that when you do hold on, like honestly, I've had situations where I've had a goal and I reach it and I don't even realize I reached it, and I was like, oh, actually I remember I wanted to do that for like 2 years ago. Like I did it last week. I didn't even realize. Because it really is just a moment in your life. It's just so much smaller than the actual process, like the actual like full like work or experience to get to where you are. And a lot of the time, there's other moments throughout the process that are a lot bigger and more influential in your life than the actual result. That create more change, joy, expansion in your life than the actual result. Because when I look at my diploma, I'm like, yeah, all right. I'm like, all right, cool. But the process of even getting my master's.
It's that snapshot.
Right.
It's that snapshot moment, right?
Exactly.
But then you see there's more opportunities, like even what you were just describing. You hit a goal, and if you're appreciating the process, then you're going to end up developing another goal. Like right after. If you listen to any of those successful people in their respective fields, that's what they'll tell you. It's like, I didn't say this was the goal and that's my ceiling, I'm done, I don't want to work anymore. No, now I'm evolving. Again, going back to Carlos's example, maybe it was I need to do a back handspring, and then I can do a backflip, and then I want to do an aerial, and then I want to do whatever other things that you want to do, right? It slowly evolves because you start hitting this thing, now you go up some more. But I got to respect and appreciate the process. And I think for a lot of young folks right now, and a lot of young men in particular, I think it's very difficult because I think there's a lot of lack of appreciation for that journey. But that's really what's going to shape you into who you are and who you're going to be. It's how you learn how to ride the waves of life, right? That is going to happen. So back to, what we're talking about, if you're talking about opening up, why is that going to benefit me? Because, hey, I can maybe connect with people who can help me get to where I want to be. I can also have support as I'm going through some of my difficult moments in time, and I maybe need some additional support and resources to help through that. And also it helps me to feel less lonely and isolated, which a lot of us have been going through for the last almost 3 years, dealing with not only the pandemic, but just maybe also having difficulty with truly being willing to allow other people in and allowing people to support us as we're going through these different stages of change also in our life. That's another big thing that we don't always talk about. We're growing constantly. Like who you were now is probably not who you were 6 months ago. It's probably not who you were a year ago or 2 years ago. So we got to recognize those changes, also part of the process, right? We're constantly evolving in those ways. So we have to be willing to allow other people in to give us perspective, to give us insight, perhaps guidance if you want a mentor or somebody to give you some game for whatever it is that you're trying to work towards. But it starts with us really allowing others to be able to do that with us and us sharing with them. And I'm hoping that when people listen to things like this or us telling our own stories and bits and pieces about what we've gone through, they may resonate, they may understand, they may say that sounds similar to what I'm going through, and maybe are willing to add in some of those things that we're saying that we do or have done and get better outcomes. So again, they don't have to be going through so much difficulty or end up giving up on their hopes or their dreams because they think it's impossible to achieve. But we got to be willing to let people in to help us, though.
Definitely. And I think also like really that the importance of us really doing that work allows us to value more the outcome as well. Right? By you opening up more, it really and doing that work, because I know a lot of the time when it comes to opening up, we might have some feelings of fear for suffering that you might have to experience, because if you're doing the inner work, you might have to feel some tough feelings again, especially when you're sharing with someone else. Like you're probably going to feel that again as you're sharing, and that fear can stop you from sharing altogether. And my point here is, don't let that fear like stop you from getting that outcome, because a lot of the time like we tend to wanna like avoid it, trying to find a hack or a way to not literally go through those feelings, but those are necessary because it really allows us to value those outcomes a lot more. Like that diploma, for example, to go back to that, like college, like I value it a lot more because I know what I did to get to get that result. If I went to a college website and I'm like, yo, I want a master's degree, they're like, oh, we just mailed it to you. It's coming in, like it's coming today, and then you just got a diploma. Like I'm like, okay, like I don't value it. And so I most likely won't be concerned about maintaining or continuing to improve. I think a great example is lottery winners, because they don't go through the process of becoming wealthy. They don't go through the process of gaining that, like those millions or whatever it might be. Most of them end up losing it because they don't value it and they don't understand what it takes to create that much wealth. So when they do have it, they splurge it and they use it unwisely. So it's important for us to go through our process. Like if being a millionaire is a goal for you, like if you don't know what it takes to generate that amount of income, and how many people you need to serve to actually generate that, then when you do get it, you're not going to appreciate it, and you're most likely going to lose it all, and you're not going to be able to sustain that. So that process is really important. Like it really is so important, and it allows us to value more the result. Um,
Absolutely. No, that's a bit. I think that's a very big point, and I would even almost draw a direct connection why it's beneficial to what we're describing here. Why it's
mm,
beneficial, especially for the men, to open up, and then how we even determine what we value
mm,
and how we maybe value even ourselves.
right.
I think that's important because if I'm going through my life and I'm going through my journey and I'm sort of just waiting until I hit this magical moment that I think, like, that's what's in my mind, right? I think like when I hit this moment, I hit this amount of income, or I can buy this car, I can buy this house, and I feel fulfilled. My life has
Mhm.
had purpose, right? I think you'll find that your life is quite empty, because it's tied to something that's, that doesn't really describe and express who you are as a person. I would make the case actually that the more that we open up, the more likely you're going to be able to figure out who you actually are and what you value and what you think your purpose in life is going to be. For example, I didn't come here, I'm not here doing this work by accident in terms of doing this stuff online, right? I've said this before, I will say it again for those who have never heard me before. So I'm a therapist, but I didn't go into the field with any assumption that I was going to be trying to talk to people online, hoping to inspire them to do their own work, to work on themselves, to hopefully lead better lives. That was not my intention. I didn't go into this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, thinking that was the game plan. I had great foresight.
Mm,
Absolutely not. But I learned through the process of opening up to colleagues, peers, former teachers, family. Things started making sense slowly,
mm.
and you try little things here and there slowly. And eventually, I met Carlos. And eventually, we filmed a show for my podcast, which is out now. And eventually, you hear
Yeah.
some of the things that we discuss, and I'm like, you know what? Other people need to hear this. And then I had to learn within myself, perhaps I need to get on here and talk about some of these things and be a part of some of these discussions, because that I feel is my purpose.
Love it.
But that took time. I didn't
Mhm.
know that right off the bat. It took me continuous time trying to learn more about how this thing works and what value I think I can even offer to people who are watching or listening. Because I don't think I have all the answers. I just want to be able to do whatever I can do to contribute, hopefully, to people making positive impacts in their lives in whatever way possible.
I love it. I love it. I think you're making an amazing point. I think you're making an amazing point. It really, that process teaches you about you. It really does, and it's crucial. Like so many times we get so attached to this outcome. Like if you would have said, "Oh, I want to be this," there's a massive chance that you might not even be on this call right now. Because he was so attached, and if he was so attached to that outcome, like he might get there and start feeling like, oh, like this is not even what I wanted. Like
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
we live in this society of I'll be happy when
Mm-hmm.
that it's unhealthy, it's unhelpful, it can be really damaging for mental health to live like
Yeah.
that, to start to think that as an outcome or a consequence is going to bring you that joy or that fulfillment that you're looking for.
Mm-mm.
That can be really damaging. One of the best things we can do is really find the joy, the happiness, the fulfillment in the now. That's the only thing that we truly have some kind of grasp on. No one in this planet knows what's going to happen an hour from now. Like you can ask billionaires, you can ask the top scientists in the world. They might assume, they might have an idea, but no one knows what's going to happen an hour, a day,
Mm-hmm.
5 years from now. So many of us are so caught up on like, okay, well, this, and this to happen in the next 10 years. We don't know. So the best thing that we can do is really focus on the now. What can I do right now to, appreciate this moment, to gain this, to find the beauty in this moment right now?
Yeah.
Because we're so caught up in time traveling, worrying so much about the future, or caught up in the past, like like literally just ruminating and dwelling on stuff that happened to us in the past. When in
Mm-hmm.
reality, the only thing that is real, like, is the now. So it's so important for us to move away from this societal ideal that I'll be happy when I make $1 million. I'll be happy when I get my dream car. I'll be happy. I'll be joyful when I meet this person. That it's that can be really damaging, and I've seen it myself around people who have had that thought and that idea, and then when they get there, they feel so empty, like RJ
Yeah.
said. They're like, oh, wow, and they are completely distraught. They're completely and this they go really low. They
Yeah.
really go like deeply into negative thoughts and emotions, and that makes sense. Honestly, it just makes sense because
Yeah.
we saw so much more attached to the result that we don't even know if what we want, because we have to experience it truly to know if it's something that we want.
Absolutely.
Um,
There's no way to know that, I think, ahead of time. I would even
mhm,
take it a step further.
I love it. Let's
For
do
anybody who is listening or who watches this and is like and is thinking that their life is going to have more value once they
it.
attain or acquire enough stuff.
Mm,
Exactly what Carlos was just saying. This car, this house, this community that I live in. I would make the point to you, because I'm a people person, right?
mm,
I would make the point to you that the thing that matters the most is the relationships with the people that we have. That matters more than any amount of wealth you can acquire, unless you use that wealth to be a force for good,
right.
to do something to positively impact the lives of those around you, not just simply acquire wealth simply just to have it.
Hmm.
Because that then your legacy is not one of service, of truly uplifting and empowering other people to live more quality types of lives. So I would make the point, if you're living for stuff, you probably feel pretty empty already.
Right.
And if you don't, when you achieve those things, you probably will at that time realize it doesn't hold the same weight as you thought it would. People do. Relationships do. We're humans, right? We value, whether you would admit it or not, we value human connection. I'm not saying you have to be the most connected with every single person. What I'm saying is you value connection to some degree. You would much rather have somebody there genuinely be there for you when you need help, or when you want to spend time with somebody and share in building beautiful moments with them. That holds more weight than any amount of things that you can purchase. All that stuff doesn't really do anything for you at the end of the day. You can't cuddle that at night and let it hold you back. They're not going to be there for you in your last days on this planet.
Hmm.
You don't get to watch them grow like you do for those that maybe want children one day. It's not the same.
Hmm.
So I think if we're operating from this idea or this framework that if I just amass a lot of stuff, I'm going to feel valued, I'm going to feel appreciated, I know that I made it. Maybe in some respects, to somebody's idea, I would say you're probably going to end up very lonely,
Hmm.
because to acquire a lot of those things means you're going to have to work a lot. So you might not be prioritizing yourself. You might not be prioritizing your relationships with others. And I, as a therapist, I'm not going to encourage that type of thinking, because I think that it doesn't give us truly the value in return that we really want. So I just wanted to put that idea out there for those that may have never thought about that before, to consider maybe what you might be searching for, or maybe something that you should consider,
Hmm.
is to allow for putting more effort into valuing those around you that you truly appreciate or you want to appreciate more. Because one thing I generally took away from this time being in the pandemic and trying to learn to navigate it like everybody else did was it was extremely lonely. It's very isolating. And a lot of us were missing somebody that we really maybe wanted to spend time with. Maybe they're no longer with us. So let's not wait, to Carlos's point. Let's not wait and keep pushing all these things off. If you want to do these things, then start doing them now.
I think that's a great way to end a conversation today. Literally, I think that's perfect. Beautifully said, sir. I think all the gems that you drop are absolutely necessary, and I recommend, if you're live, if you're watching the recording of this, watch this a couple of times, because it might take a little bit to really take in some of the ideas and that we bring up throughout this talk, especially if you might have some paradigms or ways to look at the world that might not be anywhere close to what we say in this call. So it
Mhm.
might take a couple of times to listen and really understand where we're coming from, our intention behind this. and the importance of us really opening up, because it really does matter. It really does matter in your life. It really does matter in the lives of people close to you. It really does matter in the health of the earth overall.
Hmm.
So, just to literally watch this, maybe you might have to watch this a couple of times, and like really go through it. And even I definitely highly recommend, and we said this before, watch it with a notepad. Pause it, take some notes on stuff that might be coming up, because we
Hmm.
think sometimes that we have a thought, but thoughts are fleeting. So like once you put it down on paper, you can go back to it and like really break down and start asking yourself questions about the thoughts that you might be having, and start really um, wondering like, where's this coming from? Where does this idea start? Where did I hear it first? When did it become part of my identity? Like stuff like that. But
Yeah.
overall, like conversations like this, it's really important and really helpful. I feel that we take the time to really not just listen, but really implement as well. Like really take the time to absorb the information, because we did share a lot of information here. We did.
Yeah.
It can even feel overwhelming. So take your time. If you need to watch this 10 minutes a day, then do it. Just 10 minutes a day. Absorb it. Write down what you learn, and like really like get like explore a little bit more about yourself, because that's the whole point. And for you to get to know yourself better, and a lot of the time it's gonna show you the importance of opening up. It's gonna show
Yeah.
you the importance of why, as a society, we should, especially as men, we should look for and be intentional about opening up more often. Um, is there anything else you'd like to add, RJ? Though.
I mean, I definitely want to echo that point. And I mean, to answer the question, in the title, yes, we should open up more. We
Yes.
need to, it's vital. If you didn't figure that out up to this point, yes,
Mhm.
you need to. I think like Carlos said, we definitely dropped some information on some different ways you can try to implement some of this into your life. So if you don't know how to start, if you say, yes, I agree that I should, but I don't know what to do,
Mhm.
then go back, because we did mention some different ways that you can start this process. And I think that being intentional, like we always talk about, is going to be the foundation of this. You're not going to fall into a situation where you learn to open up more. You have to work on it a little bit every day. And you got to work on building that type of relationship and that type of support system with people around you, so that you feel more comfortable to do it. But it is absolutely necessary. And I think we've also given you some examples of what are some of the things that can happen to you as you get older if you choose not to do it. And ultimately, the choices are always up to you. I'm certainly not one here trying to preach to anybody. I'm
Mhm.
simply trying to give a perspective. So I hope that you listen to this with open ears and an open mind, and understand that if you choose to adopt some of these ideas, I think there's a greater chance for you to be happy, to be fulfilled, and be satisfied with your life, particularly for the men out there. And I hope that you take some of this information in and really just try your best to try to practice in any way that you can. But I appreciate you guys for listening, and for all of us being here today. Thank you for having me, Carlos.
For sure. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate your vulnerability and your expertise. Like it's greatly appreciated. And I hope the person watching does as well, because this is years of experience, both professionally and personally.
Mhm.
We're really here talking from the heart. We're really here to help our communities heal. That's what we're here for. So
Yep.
thank you if you joined us live throughout this. Thank you so much. If you're watching the recording, thank you. Like thank you for loving yourself. It's one of my favorite things to say, because this is really all about self love. Because it really starts with that self love, that self care.
Yeah.
So thank you, and thank you again also for giving us one of the most valuable things that you have, which is your time and your attention. So I really appreciate you. I really look forward to seeing you in the next episode. We're going to be diving into really fun stuff for sure. So definitely stay tuned. It's going to be here on the psychology Instagram as well. Make sure you follow my friend RJ on Inspire Wellness Solutions 2021. He has his own podcast, which is incredibly empowering, amazing, filled with gems. He talks to many mental health professionals as well, who just open up and share so many valuable tools that we can use as a society. So definitely jump on
And
there.
you, and you.
Yeah, and my
Anyway,
episodes are down too, so make sure you jump on there and listen to that as well, for sure. And yeah, like definitely stay tuned. And if you have absolutely, if you're watching the recording, if you have any questions, make sure you drop them in the comments. If you don't feel comfortable about maybe putting yourself out there because this is public, you can
mhm.
reach out and send us a DM. You can send a DM to B or
Feel
RJ, and
free.
yeah,
Feel
feel
free.
free, and we'll definitely help out however we can, and try to add value to you however we can as well. So definitely drop a question. I encourage you dropping them in the comments so that other people can also gain some value from them. But if you don't feel comfortable, that's 100% okay. Just you can reach out to us directly, and we'll definitely help however we can.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe out there.
Peace. Peace.
Peace.